These are some paintings by a man called Jan van Goyen, a talented 17th century artist living in Amsterdam. Van Goyen developed a new obsession in his 30s: tulips. Since everyone around him was buying them out of sheer speculation, he thought to himself, why not? So he joined in the delusion of the masses and within a short amount of time lost nearly everything. In his 50s, he moved into a smaller house and sold all of his work. When he passed away at the age of 60, he was 18,000 guilders in debt. His widow had to sell all of his remaining paintings and furniture. In some ways, tulips in 17th century Netherlands were what Bitcoin is today, a highly volatile asset. But how did the Dutch Tulip Mania of the 17th century begin? The Netherlands was going through a transformation in the early 1600s. Having recently earned its independence from Spain, the country was focusing on maritime trade and colonist expansion. Trading across continental Europe or the Baltic was one thing, but to expand their influence across Asia, the Americas, and Africa was another. The Dutch East India Company, or VOC, was making inroads into Asia, and the West Indian Company, or WIC, into the New World. The empire quickly outshone the Portuguese and began rivaling the Spanish. The Dutch were hauling in the cash. Given the instability of the previous 2 centuries, the Dutch merchants were finding new ways to obtain autonomy. The changing political landscape of the mid to late 16th century allowed them to do just that. As spices rolled into Amsterdam, so did an unusual amount of traders. Before long, the city became a global center of trade and banking. Despite rising inflation and falling wages, Dutch society thrived and quickly came to boast the highest living standard in all of Europe. Merchants were a major class during the Dutch Golden Age and occupied the iconic canal-side mansions of Amsterdam. Walking through the city, these and other mansions could be seen lined with exotic flowers, many of which arrived from the Ottoman Empire, in particular Western Asia. The largely bourgeoisie society of Amsterdam considered flowers the ultimate sign of taste and beauty. But the immense desire to own them quickly turned them into a status symbol. Something as natural as flowers had lost their innocent appeal, only to take on a vapid glamour. It wasn't long before their prices began appreciating, and since it was a city of merchants, a lot of people noticed an opportunity to make a quick buck. In a bid to buy low, sell high, merchants added fuel to the fire. More demand led to higher prices, which led to speculation, which led to even higher prices. It was a vicious cycle. Different flowers fetched different rates, and the more unique a piece was, the more its admirers. Obviously, these weren't admirers in the poetic sense, they just wanted the quote-unquote weight in gold. Tulips were highly sought after and prized, with rare varieties selling for as much as the equivalent of 25,000 USD today. The greed of the merchant class and the gluttony of the aristocracy had just given way to the Tulip Mania. As some of the richest people in the world at the time, the Dutch formed formalized stock markets, highly professional business contracts, and investment groups. The city of Amsterdam was at the cutting edge of modern banking, ripe with hope and ambition. The intelligent merchants began drawing up contracts for tulip bulbs that were still in the ground, since they would flower the next season and appreciate in price. But the goal was not to take care of the bulb until it blossomed. The goal was to offload the bulb's contract to another buyer, who would buy it in the hopes of offloading that contract to yet another buyer, who did it to further offload, and so on and so forth. Another major reason for buying the bulbs was their durability. While handling a delicate flower could prove disastrous, buying bulbs in bulk was far more pragmatic. Here's an interesting story. A foreign sailor landed in Amsterdam and concluded business with a local merchant. He received a red herring for his troubles, which he found lacking. So he picked up a nearby onion to satiate his appetite. An angry mob chased him down, beat him up, and threw him into prison because the thing he picked up was not an onion, but rather a tulip bulb. And not just any bulb. It was a Semper Augustus tulip worth 3,000 guilders. As more people sought to get into the trade before prices peaked, the bubble became more and more intense. As the years went on, the speculative nature of the tulip business had well and truly gotten out of hand. Their market value was highly inflated, and people were even selling their houses and businesses in the hopes of buying into this lucrative market. One trader famously sold his house for 10 bulbs. Tulips were almost always bought up and in high demand in the second-hand market. It was not weird to see rare tulips sell for 5,000 guilders, the price of a colorful canal-side mansion, and at the height of the craze, the rarest of tulips sold for 10,000 guilders. The most obvious sign that no one was actually interested in the flowers themselves is that diseased tulips were sought after due to their brandishing colors. Switzer pattern tulips in particular looked exotic and commanded high prices. But all good things must come to an end, and the wild profit margins and day trading of tulips finally ended in February of 1637. You see, tulip bulbs are mildly poisonous, so when the bubonic plague made yet another appearance in Europe, people began avoiding tulip bulbs, to put it colloquially, like the plague. Those sought-after diseased tulips? Their value depreciated immensely. Suddenly, the bubble broke. Within a few days, its devastating impact on the economy became apparent. Businesses suffered losses, and the economy was affected. While Tulip Mania was a largely aristocratic affair, it came to affect every strata of the Dutch society – upper, middle, and lower classes. Lately, historians have speculated the scope of Tulip Mania, some concluding that the Dutch really liked the flowers. Others think, however, that it was simply a fad, an absurdly hilarious race to offload a highly inflated asset. Though Tulip Mania did happen, to what extent is still disputed. Like, share, and subscribe to Histoddities for more fascinating explorations into the world's most intriguing historical events.